The world of Little Nightmares is one filled with mystery and complexity, but the way the world works is one that's actually rather simple. Whether that be the puzzles, the platforming, the random freaky stuff sprinkled throughout, or just the general direction of the gameplay and controls themselves, Little Nightmares had a playthrough experience that I not only thoroughly enjoyed, but would recommend to anybody who enjoys puzzle platformers. The best part is that you don't even have to like horror either. Little Nightmares may give you a scare every once in a while, but this game doesn't treat itself like a typical jump scare ridden game that's only in it for the reactionary YouTube promotion, money, and cheese. Built around a creepy yet intriguing universe with mysteries around that beg for you to dig into them all yourself, something I very much learned the hard way, Little Nightmares handles itself just the right way that makes it capable of making you wish you weren't playing it at all, but also leave you unable to put it down. Similarly, like Mr. Noodly appendages here, the imagery of Little Nightmares is unique and jaw-dropping as well, in the most terrifyingly beautiful way. Like a train wreck you just can't look away from, despite very much appalling you. So take a hearty bite out of some questionable sausage, hug your tears and fears away like you just don't know what's coming next, and slide with me right into Little Nightmares, a critical analysis, part 1. So, back in paragraph 1 of this analysis, I mentioned puzzles and platforming in the world of Little Nightmares, and for good reason. This game is most definitely a horror-esque puzzle platformer that does exactly what it sets out to do with its gameplay, and achieves this feat particularly due to its simplicity. Whether it be by looking at the control page of the menu or learning and understanding the separate parts of the controls as you explore the world, it becomes very obvious that there aren't that many things you can really do in terms of the gameplay, but the controls never feel oversimplified. Much of the joy and satisfaction of actually playing the game comes from solving a puzzle or slickly escaping the grasp of your enemies. Because Little Nightmares isn't a combat game and doesn't have a reason to feature anything too complex, this ends up ultimately working towards the game's benefit. If we instead look at a game like the PS4's swan song title, Ghost of Tsushima, however, we see something very different. In order to master that game, there's a lot that goes into understanding the controls. Some of the buttons you use to do certain attacks or moves can also be used to switch some of the battle items you can have ready for immediate use. In addition, there are also 4 different basic battle stances that Jin can take once you unlock them all, and all of them have a very different playstyle and are effective against different types of enemies. And there's honestly a lot more to it than even just that I just don't have the time or care to mention right now. Ghost of Tsushima is a game that I honestly probably would not recommend to anybody who isn't a pretty dedicated gamer, because there's so much technicality in the gameplay that it can be hard to play, let alone master. I bring up this example to, well, exemplify how the small amount of choices you can make in Little Nightmares are still good. Complexity, as with Ghost of Tsushima, can mean convolution, and thus leave the title inaccessible to certain demographics or groups of prospective players. But the simplicity of Little Nightmares is something that I honestly feel like almost anybody could play, experienced gamer or not. If you have any form of experience with gaming in the past, picking up Little Nightmares and playing it will definitely be a cinch. Now, if you're like me and expected Little Nightmares to teach you how to play it through your average conventional tutorial, you might be ever so slightly disappointed. But with that being said, Chapter 1 is designed in a way that makes this not a problem. It's slightly more slow-paced than the following chapters in a way that allows you to ease yourself into the foreboding atmosphere without immediately being pushed into action. This nature and style also means that you have the ability to learn the controls through trial and error without being overly punished or becoming frustrated. Practically immediately upon starting, you come to a point that's very dark and you just kind of have to fumble around with the controller to figure out that circle on the PlayStation 4 controller turns on your lighter. You can light a lantern here and then you mess with the controls again to figure out that holding R2 allows you to grab onto things and that L2 makes you crouch. You will also find out that X allows you to jump. Shortly after, you learn that holding R2 is also how you climb and allows you to open closed doors like this here fridge. Additionally, you can also hug these cute little gnomes with R2. Aww. Later, you come across a puzzle that requires you to sprint to continue, and after messing with a couple controls, you quickly learn that square allows you to sprint. And just like that, you basically know all of the controls. The only thing that you may not know yet at this point is that while holding an object with R2, pressing X will make you throw the object, and not allow you to jump. The platforming of the game is also very intuitive with the controls. As long as you know where all the buttons are and what they do, all you have to do is know where you're trying to go. And although sometimes this isn't totally clear, a little bit of trial and error will help you immensely. For the most part, the game is intuitive enough with these things that you shouldn't have too many problems. But if you do have major problems finding something, I wouldn't feel too bad quickly looking up a guide to show you that one specific thing you're missing, as it can decrease your frustration immensely. But fair warning that looking up guides could obviously spoil you if you look too far. On to the topic of puzzles. Well, this will be split into two different sections, one for the base game and one for the DLC, since the two are actually surprisingly separate from each other in this category. The basic information regarding the puzzles of the base game is that they're relatively simple most of the time to figure out, yet they are rewarding and fun to complete. Whether it simply be having to open a door and learn how to sprint in order to reach the door and slide under it before it closes, or learning to push the button on this TV in order to attract Roger Rogers' demon hair noodles so you can sneak this other crank over to aid you in escaping the starchy man that be. I remember that in my personal experience with this game, I had relatively few occurrences of feeling lost or confused on what to do. I actually did admittedly have problems knowing to push the button in the aforementioned TV example personally, just because my dummy head didn't notice the button on it, and I might have partially struggled in some other areas, but when it comes to puzzles and environmental hazards, I didn't have too many issues with the game. Most of my personal problems came with trying to escape certain tense situations though. In this particular scene at the very end of chapter 3, I was having problems timing my escape just right in order to not get caught, but I did triumph after just a few tries, and ultimately that's all it took most of the time. Like I so praised previously in the gameplay section, plenty of Little Nightmares encounters are similarly built for learning through trial and error. Most times, even the most testing challenges take an amount of attempts you can count on one hand. On the other hand, however, the puzzles and situational hazards of Secret of the Maw, the 3 DLC chapters, weren't designed nearly so well in my humble opinion. The first chapter, titled The Depths, was by far the best designed though. The water mechanics and puzzles, although a little bit more brain-racking in general than the base game's puzzles, were enjoyable to solve, and featured a significant reward factor as well. Similarly, the water hazards were also well designed. Planning out routes to avoid being in the water for too long so that the granny doesn't catch you is equal parts exhilarating and terrifying, because let me tell you, having a scraggly, disgusting grandma who'd rather stuff you in her oven than bake you cookies with it isn't exactly what I'd call a fun time, but it was definitely fun to dunk on her for being slow. But now we move on to chapter 2 of the DLC, which is a mixed bag all things considered. I have a love-hate relationship with the Hideaway. You know why I love the Hideaway? Because a fairly large chunk of it is just puzzles that you have to solve with these cute little gnome dudes. But you know why I hate the Hideaway?
Because a fairly large chunk of it is just puzzles that you have to solve with these cute little gnome dudes.
First off, the puzzles in the Hideaway are mostly pretty convoluted and unclear, because this is a non-linear level similar to, well, no other Little Nightmares chapters up to this point. A lot of the things that you're supposed to do are very unclear. I honestly don't have much shame in admitting that I used a guide for like 75% or more of this chapter because I was just frustrated more than anything throughout the entire thing. I mean, the gnomes made me feel better whenever they actually followed me and didn't act like stubborn 8-year-olds, but that's somewhat besides the point, even though they actually are legitimately stubborn 8-year-olds, but that's a topic not for this video. Anyway, the puzzles and situational hazards in the Hideaway just weren't too great. I mostly just kinda want to scream and yell right now about how freaking stupid this part was with the conveyor belt, but I'll save that for my own personal time so that I don't break any of your guys' eardrums or patience. Needless to say, this part really kinda sucks. The whole chapter kind of does in a way. And another thing, the AI for the janitor in this chapter doesn't seem to be the greatest either in my experience. Most especially in this dark section to the very far right of the boiler room engine thingy, where unless you pass the janitor and go straight towards the stairs immediately, which you obviously wouldn't know to do on your first try, it's literally impossible to go through the desk and pass the janitor naturally because he never stays away long enough for his arm to not feel you as you go past. Trust me, I tried more than once before finally deciding to just risk it for the biscuit, so to speak, even though any biscuit that comes from this this place probably isn't something I want. But you know what? It's okay. It's fine. Okay, not really, but it doesn't matter. Let's just move on. Gameplay wise, the hideaway isn't too special either. You get to use a bunch of gnomes, for better or for worse, to solve your problems, but mostly this chapter is for the lore reveal that these gnomes are in fact children. But other than that, there's nothing really special about it. And now for chapter 3. The Residence is similar to the Hideaway in the sense that it's more open and less linear than other Little Nightmares material. However, the actual ability to solve the problems to allow yourself to escape are much less annoying to figure out than the Hideaway. Most of them make sense once you realize what you need to do, although it admittedly sometimes takes way too long to figure out what you do need to do. But most of the chapter that doesn't consist of solving puzzles to move through it, consists of these stupid little clouds of junk or whatever. Like, seriously, what the heck are these and why do they have to exist? I hate these things more than anything else in the series, including the stupid conveyor belt. But no, seriously, these things. Anyway, other than little problems, I'd say I enjoy the gameplay and puzzle solving factors of this chapter better than the Hideaway, but I'd still play the Hideaway again over dealing with these little things any day of the week. Although I'm a little salty about some things about the DLC, I'm going to fully admit that I highly enjoyed playing this game, Secrets of the Maw and all. I fully intend on replaying all of it again actually at some point in time to get the rest of the trophies later, just because I really want to. Plus, puzzle platformers are always fun to replay just for the sake of experiencing them again with familiarity, as well as to see how much less time it takes, since I already know everything. I don't think I'll work on getting the trophy for beating the game in less than 1 hour with 0 deaths though, because I don't have time for that right now. But I would consider streaming something like that in the future if I start doing streams, but I digress. Just for the experience of playing Little Nightmares, I'd say it's well worth it. I was able to get the complete edition for like $6 or $7 on sale on my PlayStation 4 at one point in February or March I think, or something like that, and I'm super glad I did because I enjoyed my time playing it. I don't know what full price for the game is, but I'd be inclined to say it's probably worth it at that price as well. Since the game itself doesn't really include any story or lore within it, the gameplay is most of the experience at first glance. It's a fun game, but if you're a lore guy, well, that's a totally different beast to tackle, and mostly involves research and personal interpretation, something I made the massive mistake of getting into. But you're in luck. Part 2 of this analysis is out now on that exact topic, so go check it out. Go click on it, like, in 15 seconds when the video is over. With all that being said guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe so that you don't miss a theory video releasing tomorrow as well. That's all from me. Stay safe guys, and I'll be back again in the next one.